Hey everyone, welcome back. We are here today with Mark. He's an incredible leader of what is called the Concord Leadership Group, and he has served as its CEO for 20 years. And in that time, he's presented trainings and keynotes for over 27,000 participants, which is no small feat. His latest book, Surprising Gift of Doubt, Using Uncertainty to Become the Exceptional Leader You Are Meant to Be, is what we'll be talking about today. He has so many qualifications and has been doing this work, leading leaders. And when you are on the top of your game, writing a book might be something that's in your mind. We're going to talk all about what it means to write a book, how it helps and impact your work, and maybe some of the challenges that come. Mark, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So this isn't your first book necessarily. You have other books. Tell me about this book writing journey to get this one out. I was intrigued, honestly. Of course, I love Page Two. They do wonderful work. I've known them for several years, the founders. But the surprising gift of doubt is what intrigued me. I'm like, ooh, this is well titled. I like it already. But tell me where the impetus of this book, and maybe we'll talk about your other books as well.
Well, I was raised in a weird family where I had schoolwork because I was a student, but I also had Pitman family homework that I had to do because I was a Pitman. So my parents assigned me books like Dale Carnegie and Think and Grow Rich and Florence Littauer and Les Brown. And I saw the impact that those books had on me, and often books from authors who are no longer living were still having an impact on me. And so even in my teenage years, I realized that's the kind of impact I want for others. I'd like to have a lasting legacy. So publishing a book was not, I set goals in my 20s, and I think I can't find the list. I have not yet been able to find my list, but I set decadal goals until I was 120 years old, and then figured I could renegotiate at that point. And one of them was to have 20 books that I had written of a certain page limit and a certain value, because in some of the systems my parents were in, we had book of the month and tape of the week type things. And the books of the months some of them were pretty awful. They looked like they were just slop, even before, decades before AI slop. So I wanted to write stuff that was important, that would help people in their real life, not just take up space. So that was, yeah. So my first book is almost 20 years old now.
What's that first book?
Called Ask Without Fear. And this is something that may be helpful for people thinking about a book. I found I'm a coach and a speaker, and I know that everybody's going to tell me whatever system I have is great, but it's not for them. They're unique. They have different set of problems. So as a coach, I wanted to start there. But what I found with the book was people needed to know I had a system that they could say, yeah, but too. So my first book, Ask Without Fear, was that. What could be helpful for if you're thinking of writing a book is the title. I had a great title. It was really good. It was an acronym, and it was one that I could build like a whole Chicken Soup for the Soul series off of. And it was so much fun. And I went to my list and I had them help me name the book. And the people the prize was a early release of the first book, the first copy. As I was writing it though, after the name contest, I realized I don't like writing this name. It's too long. And if I don't like it, how is a journalist going to want to write about my book? Because they'd have to type it too. So I went back to my list, and they came up with this wonderful title called Ask Without Fear. It was about nonprofit fundraising, and it was not a title I thought of, but it's become an incredibly important trademark term now for my company. And it was amazing to have my list feel like they were co-creators in the book with me. And all of my list, of course, were perfect buyers for the book. So it was like I was warming up my list before the launch. And they helped me create something that was much better than what I thought was creative.
That's great. So as a leader and as a coach, now if you're a coach and listening to this, you might be wondering, is a book for me? When you think about what it is you do on a day-to-day basis in your organization, how has the book helped position yourself maybe to gain new clients or broaden your audience or maybe tighten it, however you perceive it? How has that book, especially this new one, The Surprising Gift of Doubt, how might that have helped or make it different for your work?
Three things come to mind immediately. One, it helped crystallize my thinking. So I really had to force myself to be clear on what I was saying. And that's why this last book, The Surprising Gift of Doubt, was so hard. It was about a 20-year journey to answer my mom's question. So what do you do for a living? So it took so long for me to figure out how to say that. So crystallize that. Um, having books, what's amazing to me is in a digital age, there's a smoke and mirrors still of books. One of my colleagues who went through coach training with me together 23 years ago, um, she doesn't get the same speaker fees I get, even though she has better success or more demonstrable success because she doesn't have a book. And that is crazy because there's something about the printed matter. There's something about the credibility. And there's still, I'd been blogging long before the book. I'd been having email lists, doing all those sorts of things, webinars. But the book actually feels like something that is a legitimacy test for others. So clears up your own thoughts, gives you instant credibility, and helps you increase your fees, or just get access to different places because you have a written book. And the third thing I found with this last book is it also helps you potentially build a curriculum. So I built a whole International Coach Federation accredited certification program with this book as its core after the book came out. And that became a whole nother income stream.
Right. I think a lot of authors are looking for validation when they're writing a book, which is a reasonable thing to do. I'm not going to tell them they shouldn't want validation. More that they're looking for someone to choose them and say, we pick you. And what I tell them is, look, a book is an investment in your business and in your message. You don't necessarily need to wait for a publisher on high to descend down from the clouds of the big five and say, oh, I choose you, and here's your advance that you'll never make back and you'll never see a penny. They don't do that very often. I do coach authors who have big advances and have hit those big New York Times lists, which is fantastic. But the majority of us, we are going to use a book as leverage. We'll make way more from the back end of our book from what the book provides us in credibility, speaker fees, client referrals, than worrying about if someone picks us. Tell us a little bit about what your philosophy is about that, because I know for me, investing in a book takes time, energy, and money. But
and money,
I am strategic.
I remember, and I've just started redoing this again, but over the years, I would go into bookstores and look to see where would my book be listed, and then find out who are the publishers that seem to be gearing the books to my audience and to my topics. With my first book, I gave it to an early reader who was experienced, also a published author, and she said, "Don't use this particular imprint. They want your book, but they will make it a textbook, and you've done something that's incredibly readable." So when I found the publishing house, and for me, I needed the validation. I've done 8 books. 3 of them have been through publishers. 5 of them have been self-published. And I created my own imprint. That doesn't sound like me, but is still me. But doing this, finding the publisher, it was Executive Books, a guy named Charlie Tremendous Jones, who was a public speaker. He told me, you're not going to make money on the book. It's a $2 or $3 business card. It's an expensive business card that you're going to give out, but it's all on the back end for you. And that was very helpful for me to have that perspective, particularly with this last book where I went with a hybrid publisher. And there was, so when you're bootstrapping, you can do the book really poorly and get it out there. With Page 2, it became incredibly well produced. It is the one that we're most proud of, to the point where with my first book nearing 20th anniversary, my wife said, "Hey, why don't we see if Page 2 will do a 20th anniversary edition with you so we can have a book that we're actually proud of." And the first book has sold like 35,000 copies. So it's not doing well, but 35,000 over 20 years is not making New York Times bestseller list either. But you learn different aspects as you go. So I think part of it is to get real for yourself. For me, I needed the external validation with my first book, and that gave me enough push to do my own books after that. And then I would play with, I did one on Google Plus for nonprofits, because I figured if Google Plus took off, I'd be there. I'd be there right at the beginning. And if it went nowhere, no one would know that I had written that book.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, and it was with so the other thing I look for in publishers is who are the other authors. And so I had noticed Q Publishing was having really cool authors that I wanted to hang around. And that's why I also went with Page Two, because I call them the stable of authors, are people I'd want to hang out with and meet. Some of them, a lot of them are my friends, but there are others that I would love to have in my social network. And so I think that's important too, to see who's your name going to be listed on if it's in a catalog or something.
Yeah. I know for our press, our imprint is Mandala Tree Press. We have, we tend
Great
to lean
name.
towards
Wow.
underrepresented. Thank you. Underrepresented people, women of color, uh, gay, lesbian, trans people, diverse ethnic and religious backgrounds, because we want to give an opportunity and we want them to feel supported. So it does matter where you put yourself. Doesn't mean you are making a bad choice going one place or another, but it's important to the author who they're serving, who they want to be associated with, which is really great.
So
And
to that
so,
point, the with my book, part of every single book I've written is hard. Every single book gets my inner critic going, which is, who are you to say this? It's all been said before. You've been reading these things for, decades. You're just regurgitating other people's stuff. Um, and this last one, it was, why is a straight white guy writing another book on leadership? Oh, surprise. A white guy thinks he has something to offer about leadership. There had also been a study showing that most of the leadership books were written by white straight men and read by women. And that so part of it, to answer that for me, was I invited to hire 12 different editors from different gender, different orientations, different lived experiences, different ethnicities, to see if the book was as open to a diverse audience as I thought it was. And they were wonderful. And that becomes a note on privilege, is the first part of my book, where I talk about the process of, why me? Why am I doing this? And how did I make it so that it was more in the dialect of a wider audience? Their comments were gold and not necessarily pleasant. And like not they were truthful. I'll say that.
right. Early readers, either paid or otherwise, are really helpful, especially if they're the ones going to tell you the truth. That's important. You know, I want to talk a little bit about the process for you writing books. Have you written multiple? With the age and information, of AI coming and people jumping on using AI as, I'll get AI to help me. I think they miss some things, the nuances of what books can be. I'm not saying don't use AI as support, just like I wouldn't say don't use other tools. But for you, what was the process like? I mean, is it over decades? Is it, you have a journal? Do you sit down and write it over a long period of time, or do you get, like,
Wow.
what does it look like for you to get a book out of you? And when do you think it's time for it to be germinated?
Great question. I will answer the process that I thought I was going to answer in a second. But what came up when you were saying that was, 3 years ago, my wife had a stroke, an aneurysm, and was life flighted to a hospital. She was 11 states away from where we live and was in the neuro ICU for a month. It was a tremendously hard time. And she's totally fine now. She's our COO. She's great, wonderful coach, just totally recovered. But the process was a lot of me on one of those, I don't know what the website was, but it was a website where you could keep family updated without having to have everybody call you. And in that process, it was once or twice a day, I would update and share. And people said, Mark, you're such a writer. This is your way you're processing this. And so there is that act of writing. I have been journaling since I was a teenager with the intent of, hopefully they'll help other people as they see the real crap that I go through and the real doubts I have. So I guess I am a writer all the way through. The books, what really gets me for books, and I have a regular pattern since the late 90s, I guess, of blogging and creating that kind of content. But I have found what's really helpful for books, especially to get over that who's even going to be interested question, the gremlin in the head, um, is to actually give talks on it. So my first book, I went to a technical college, a community college here in the United States, and said, I'm around, I give talks, people ask me back. If you ever have an HR training, because they have a lot of boxed curriculum sort of stuff. If you ever had an HR training that you lost a speaker to, call me on short notice, I could do it. And they said, well, have you ever taught fundraising? And I said, no. And I'd often said up until that point, I can't teach it. I just love it. So it became a 24 hours of training, which became the basis for the first book. This book there were speaking opportunities and intensives and keynotes that happened before the book came out, which helped me when I was writing it to see the actual faces of people having the aha moments and being able to then also follow their stories and use some of those stories in the book. So I have found workshopping it. I got paid for those talks. So I got paid to workshop the material, and then put it into a book form that I felt was I had more confidence will probably help people, than hoping that the tendency I see a lot of authors do is I can't talk about the book until it's all done and perfect. And then I'll talk about it. And that's usually, I have not seen that to be successful because you haven't built a following. You haven't built a group of people that are interested in your work.
I think that's really important. Ironically, being a coach myself, I do coach authors. I've not written a book about how to write because most of what I teach isn't how. Most people know how. Their problem isn't
Nice.
how. Their problem is this small distance in between the desire and the execution. So my job is to close that gap. And sometimes it's cavernous.
Okay. Yeah.
Sometimes it's perceived leap of faith. And so it's taken me a while, but over decades of and hundreds of authors coached, did I realize, I could write a book about 5 different things about writing a book that have very little to do with the words on the page and have everything to do about what's going on the inside, what the message is. Because I tell people my TED Talk was a failed book proposal that my proposalists hated. They said this proposal was terrible. It's boring. And it was hard to hear, but that's what you pay our proposalists for.
Right.
And as I went back to drawing board, I took the smallest part of the feedback and they said, look, this is all uninteresting except for this one thing. When you talk about what kids say, because I said I collected 26,000 responses to the single question, what makes a good teacher great? And they're like, that's interesting. Talk about that. What do kids say? And I was like, how am I going to talk about a book for, 200 pages about what kids say? They're like, I don't know, but it's the most interesting part of your proposal. So I struggled. I couldn't do it. I didn't know what to find. And I did the TED Talk, and that's been the germination of this conversation that I'm working on the book called Great Teachers Eat Apples. But it's taken me delivering that talk and getting feedback about why are they interested in this? So I think that premise is really strong. And so if you're out there afraid to share your ideas because you think someone will take them, or you think, I don't want anyone to know about this until I'm ready, it sort of seems like it's misaligned. And it seems like your plan, the way you're working, Mark, is to say, like, why don't I just test this out? Tell me about some other books where that has been
So you also asked a question about how do I know when it's ready for the book, which is a great question. And I'm not sure it's as planned as I'd like it to be. So the first one I knew it was a book because I wasn't getting the fees I wanted and I wasn't finding the clients. And it just felt like people said I had to get a book. And so that was that. The next two, so the second one was Another Ask Without Fear for librarians, which was going to be part of my chicken soup. I always think in multiple books. John Grisham, I didn't know until the second or third book. So I figure if I don't know fiction authors until the second or third book, no one's going to know my first book. My first book out of the box, I took a Sharpie and wrote second edition and started correcting the errors. And my dad looked at it and said, "What are you doing? You just had 10,000 books printed." And I said, "I know, but they're not what I expected." So I have my second edition, and it blew him away. So the first one was a market pressure. The next one was a desire to help a subset and because I know the better you niche something, the more people can read it for themselves. Then I had a book that was purely birthed out of a whole bunch of lunches. People were asking me about 10, 15 years ago about social media. And I was doing some trainings. And so they would say, "What do you know about YouTube? Let me take you out for lunch and I want to hear what you know, Mark." And I would say, "I don't know anything." And then 90 minutes later, I would stop talking. And so I figured, well, there's something here. There's at least a chapter each. So I did a whole book on social media networking for nonprofits that was starting with the URL and website based on my thoughts. And it was just collecting those notes. And then another book, or format for a book was totally, I never, this one I haven't published, but it was going to be 101 Secrets. So it was my blog. So I've heard booking a blog is very hard. My first book, I blogged my book. So I would the discipline for me was I have to write regularly on my blog. And so I started drafting partial chapters and all on that. This last book though was a pandemic baby. The lockdowns hit and I didn't know if I was ever going to be hired again. And my wife looked at me and said, "This is the time. You've been talking about this book for a long time. You have nothing but time now." So that was, so there are different inflection points that lead that. The Google Plus for nonprofits was totally opportunistic, and there was a publisher that was willing to play. So yeah, so there's a lot of different avenues, but it's been working out to be almost a book every 18 months, which is surprising to me. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I know that a lot of authors put a lot of pressure on themselves for a book to be good. I want it to be good. And I said, well, that's an interesting concept. To whom are you bestowing this goodness on? Like, who is the one that gets to judge that? How do you determine whether or not a book's ready?
That is a great question. So the first one, I thought when I chose my publisher, I didn't know to ask what their editorial process was. So the publisher I chose was used to taking Ken Blanchard books and Tom Peters books and then reprinting them for Coliseums. These authors would go to Coliseum, sell 10,000 in a weekend. And so they didn't do any editing. So that was scary because when I saw that, I was really glad I was listening to Dan Kennedy and selling copywriting skill stuff, because my cover letter became all the deficiencies I saw in the book. This is the first time I've ever written a book so thin. I don't usually use large font, but I wanted it to be accessible for volunteers that are thinking about fundraising. So with the gift of having it in print was that I couldn't tinker on it. I would always tinker and I would always improve. And so like the second book wouldn't be the same as the first, and the third book would be different than the other two. So I think having it in print helped me to know it's done. And when Kindle was just getting started and somebody in rural Maine, the next town over from where I was, said, "Hey, when is this going to be on Kindle?" And my publisher had no vision for digital. So they gave me all the rights to that. And I was able to say, this book is exactly what you'll get in the print edition. I didn't change a thing. So I think that has been helpful for me. My sixth or seventh, I guess my seventh book, I hired an editor, because at that point I knew that I knew enough about editing to know where I needed help. And she was able to say, yeah, this is done. I do find having a coach or an outside a publisher to just help, or my spouse, but I don't want to put her on that. That's a lot of pressure to put on her. But there is a point where you kind of know it's not really moving the needle anymore. It's better to get something out there than it is to get, you can always make a second edition and you can always have other things around the book. But I don't think most of our first editions are pretty bad in my experience. So having a couple of drafts is helpful.
Yeah. I always tell authors, like, it's okay. It's a snapshot. It's a photograph of who you are.
Yes.
It's not, it's just where you are at the time you're giving this opportunity.
I think, do you think there's pressure on people if they think they're only going to ever write one book and they have to get it all into one book?
Yes. Most authors come to me with a book idea that's overstuffed. Like there's 5 different concepts stuffed in there. And I say, we don't read books to know the words. They're like, what do you mean? I said, well,
that's good.
Books aren't words. And they're really confused. They're like, well, how can books not be words? That's all they are. I said, books are messages that words are trying to hold on to so that the person can carry them to somewhere else. So don't think of them as words. What's the message? Because if the message is clear, the words will only make it better. If there's lots of word soup and there's no clear message, no simple takeaway, I can't talk about it. Your book is not worthwhile if I can't talk about it. So make it so simple, get rid of all these other things that are making it complex to talk about, and make it so easy. for me to say, wow, you look more cheerful today. Why? Well, I just finished this book. And if they can't tell you what book it is and why it helped them, it's too much. So I think a lot of authors are just afraid that they're proving themselves or
Mm.
they're hiding. They're either hiding by all these quotations and citations of other people, or they're proving by overstuffing it with their beliefs so they don't feel like they're underselling the reader. So
You just,
those are where I find
my
authors.
wife is going to be so glad we had this interview because she just called me on that this week. I've been speaking for about, almost 30 years. And I just did a training so the certification, we have 45 alum from our certification and we do monthly trainings, and it was my month to do a training. And I cited all the sources and their sources. Like I didn't just say, time management as Covey taught it, but as the Merrills taught it to him. And she came down gently to my office, sat in the chair that's behind me on this video and said, I don't think you have to keep showing your receipts. I think you have enough authority to just teach the stuff. And if people want the receipts, they'll ask for it and you've got them. You do the research, you do the hard work, but people just kind of want to know the message. They don't really need to say, maybe you could do an end notes slide that you don't show, but you could leave in the PDF.
Yeah. Well, a wise spouse is always helpful. uh, the thing about exactly what you said was that I think authors are afraid that it's the content that people are looking for. They're not confident that who they are is enough. So the content becomes the focus. And it's even becoming more apparent during AI. Content is explosive. It's everywhere. You're not going to be the person with more information. So stop. I often say that you're the lens. Think of yourself like the lens, like a magnifying glass. Like when I was a kid, I got one in the science kit back when we used to do things with before the internet. And it was great. You could look things up close, but as a 5-year-old, the coolest thing was that if I moved it just the right distance from a leaf, I could ignite it and burn it. And
I remember that. Yeah. Wow.
burn my friend's leg and ants that I owe some sort of
Ooh.
cosmic karma for. But the thing I try to tell authors is like you are the lens. You are not the content. The content is what goes through the lens, and it only will ignite when you're so clear about who you are, where you are, why you're the unique messenger. And when you focus on the lens, that's where it ignites. It's not the content. It's the sunshine. Everyone has access to the sunshine. What you do with it is bend the light. So bend the light. If you're listening to this and you want to write a book, don't worry about, has this been said before, as you mentioned earlier, Mark? Am I the right person? That's a little bit closer, but think of why me? Why my unique perspective matter to the reader that I'm trying to impact? And I feel
What I
like,
found with my first book was exactly that, was that I knew all the people humans, despite all the technological changes, human motivation and actions tend to be pretty resilient over the millennia. So when it comes to teaching leaders of nonprofits how to ask for money, we are pretty much the same as we were back in, millennia ago. So the authors that I had read from didn't, I was just, I was fearing I was just repackaging them. What I have heard consistently over the last 20 years from that book is my voice cut through to other people. There was a way I said something. There was an insight that I had. There was a levity or connections that I made. And so that's why I encourage leaders who are thinking of writing books is even if it's stuff that you know so well, you figure everybody must know it, which they don't, but you assume they do. You assume this is just the base knowledge everybody has. They haven't heard it in your voice. And they may be
yeah,
able to pick up something new and change their life because your voice cut through in a way that the others hasn't yet.
yes, and it's a perspective shift that they need. I tell authors that are not where you are, they're thinking about a book. I said, stop trying to get your reader to make a 180-degree turn on the principle you're trying to teach. Don't make them try. It's an unreasonable shift. What you're trying to do is be the sail in that human's life. And I think I want you to be the rudder. The rudder is unseen, it's invisible, but it's the way in which a ship turns. The sail is only valid if the rudder can turn it to the wind. And your job is to turn the sail, which is them, into the wind, not become the sail. So shifting them, if you shift them from where they were paying attention before and let the wind pick up where they can move forward, then that becomes an incredibly impactful journey, because 1 degree deviation on a sailing trip means leaving from Spain and ending up in the Caribbean or ending up in South America, right? That simple 1 degree shift over time. So if you just get them to notice something slightly different than they did, for example, in your book, this surprising gift of doubt is that you talk about profiles and you talk about personality tests. The slight shift is that you're asking them to think about them differently than just the idea of them. That little shift might make them perceive it differently, which will get them a result over time. And so that's what I think most authors miss when I'm coaching them. I'm trying to let them
Well,
let
and
go of some of that
that's what
thinking.
the surprising gift of doubt was able to come from. I couldn't come up with a title, and I was trying to get people to see one thing and turn 180 degrees and see, no, it's completely different. And so I worked with Tamsin Webster, who's she's been called an amazing English to English translator. She helps you craft your message. And part of what she said, her rudder analogy would be, what you do is you show people clearly what they see, and so they're nodding their head yes, and then you say, and could it be possibly this also alternative? And so that's where it was, yeah, you could be overwhelmed and broken and things, you may be needing to fix a lot of things in your life, but could it also be that you're actually on the verge of greatness and you're the voice people need to hear in the sector? Your insights are the ones that nobody is making that connection to, and that's why you're not fitting, and you feel like you're broken. Maybe you have something to offer. And so, yeah, I love the rudder because I think it's really helping people move a little bit is seismic. And like you said, you'll end up on a whole other the country if you're just 1 degree different.
Yeah. I think that's, again, that's why I tell authors don't prove, because you're becoming the sail. That's not the point of the book. You're not to be the sail. And if you do that, then
Sail like a boat. I was thinking sail like sails. Sorry.
No.
Occupational hazard, I guess.
They want to be the sail. They want to be seen, the wind, like I want to be the thing for the person reading it. I go, oh no, you need you to be felt, not seen. That's their job. That's their job to shift.
Well, here's another thing that may be helpful. I've been challenged over the years about whether do you want fame or fortune, because you can rarely have both. And I always thought fame was implied fortune, but that's the other thing too. Is if income is also part of the mix of writing a book or wanting to generate revenue, being that rudder and being the unseen is actually more profitable because the other person gets to be the hero of the story. And you're the one that's being able to be on the sidelines, coaching them or guiding them or influencing them.
Mm-hmm. Because then they become the one quoting you, which is a whole nother experience.
Goodness, it is so cool. I just had a text from somebody, another part of the United States, saying, I love it when my college students quote the fundraising coach as their source for their paper. And that's my first website, or it's still there, the fundraisingcoach.com. So it's now being cited in graduate material. Okay.
Amazing. That's fantastic. Well, I know this has been a short and brief conversation about a book. What one piece of advice would you give a leader out there who's thinking, I think I want to write a book?
The do it would be the obvious one to me. But what I'm thinking, just as in the context of this conversation, the other thing that unlocked this last book for me, which is my favorite, is Neen James, a phenomenal speaker, did a seminar on contextual models. So using 4 quadrants, using a triangle, using circles or Venn diagram, how can you draft out what you're trying to say? How can you create a picture? Because even Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, which was a very convoluted picture, but it became something that people could then point to and crystallize the content and the message. And that helped me be able to say, oh, this is what the book is. And it gave me almost the outline to write. Even though I'm more of a discovery writer, it led me on a journey, just having that picture, that contextual model.
That's really great. And if you're looking to sell your work to corporations, to groups, having a framework is essential to them, saying, we want you to come teach this framework. It's really simple, but you're the one that created it, so you need to teach it. So I think that's really important as well, especially in the field of speaker and trainer. Well, it's fantastic, Mark, to have you here. Thank you for sharing your book, your knowledge, your wisdom about writing. Where would they go to find more about you? Of course, go buy the book wherever you can find books. but where could we also find you?
Hopefully I've made myself ridiculously easy to find online. Marc with a C, Pitman, P as in Peter, ITMAN. But ConcordLeadershipGroup.com houses all the brands, and LinkedIn, I'm always open to reach out to connect with people on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being a guest and for being an author who's continually being persistent, because we need those.